Today I will be presenting this results of my postdoc really, and as I already said also that I am a historian, but I've been studying memory basically in Ukraine for many years. And actually, when I was working on my dissertation, and it was about the memory of the nationalist movement during the Second World War in Ukraine, how it is remembered in the independent Ukraine, I came across this interesting topic that the churches were very active in using this memory and in creating and shaping this memory. So I had my postdoc project primarily only on the church's dealings with the past. And actually it was really interesting because in Ukraine churches are one of the main actors who are engaged in this memory politics, memory entrepreneurship. So and today I will be speaking mainly about or present the results from two works. One is already published, and this is published in the book which I was editing with Susanna Pogumil, and it's about this concept of patrimonial church and patrimonial religion. I will then explain what it means, and then one more, it's the paper which we co-authored with Andrei Fert, my colleague from Ukraine, and it's more about contemporary memory and religion issues in Ukraine, and it's more about how churches are engaged in remembering Maidan protests of 2014, and then I will come to some words about religion and the war in Ukraine now. So what changed since February 2022. And I must say that Andrei did a lot for this, for just this paper, and he even got scholarship to come to Ireland, for instance, and he didn't leave Ukraine, so he couldn't leave Ukraine. So every time he comes to the border, he is just turned back, and even if he has all the documents and legally he can do it, but he still is in Ukraine. So that is why it's very important to say that all these non-residence scholarships for Ukrainian scholars are really important because I can see it personally, that such people as Andrei, for instance, they really need it because they cannot be Ukraine and they cannot do the research there. And then coming to the religious situation in Ukraine, and I say here today, but the results you see here of the service are from 2018, but this is the purpose, there is a purpose why I have it, because then I will show what's changed in 2019 when Ukrainian Orthodox Church got autonomy, got But for those of you who don't know the religious situation in Ukraine, I will explain a bit, because the religious situation in Ukraine is quite specific. From the collapse of the Soviet Union to 2018, there were de facto 4 main churches in Ukraine: the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate, which could continue to be dependent on the Russian Orthodox Church, although legally they claimed that they are autonomous church, but they are still linked to the Russian Orthodox Church. Then there was the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Kyiv Patriarchate, which was established in 1992 by those members of the clergy who diverged from the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchate. And then there was the Ukrainian Orthodox or the Seventh Church, which originated in 1921 in parallel with Ukrainian aspirations in 1917, 1922 to build an independent state. And then there is the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, as you know, which formed as a result of the Brest Agreement of 15 96 between the Holy See and the Ruthenian Orthodox Church. When we come to all these churches, we should say that the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchate had held the strongest position during the period since it inherited the structures and the parishes of the Russian Orthodox Church, so after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And in the 90s, all the newly established or re-established churches were competing with the Moscow Patriarchate to regain both church property and churchgoers. In such a highly competitive environment, all the churches took active standpoints in politics and used historical narratives to legitimize their own place in society. So I narrowed down my empirical material and I chose to concentrate on really memory politics, because I believe that here we can see how all the churches get really political, because very often when you read something on the situation of churches in Ukraine, you see that the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Kyiv Patriarchate is kind of political because it's presenting itself as national church, and then Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchate is kind of apolitical because they are not presenting themselves like national. But I was looking into the memory politics, and I saw that both churches actually they are quite political. They take political political positions. They really form their narratives about the past through the politics of today. And I thought that this was a good example to show how these churches kind of use the past, but in different ways. So when we look at the belonging, like what people say about the belonging in Ukraine. So in 2018, you see this situation. So it's about 70% of the Ukrainian population say that they are Orthodox believers, and about 29% said that they belong to Kyiv Patriarchate, and about 23.5% simply Orthodox, and about 13 they said that they belong to Moscow Patriarchate. So it was the time when we still have Kyiv Patriarchate or Moscow Patriarchate. So Ukrainian Orthodox Church didn't have this autonomy or canonical status. But when in 2019 the Ukrainian Orthodox Church got this status, the service results didn't really change a lot, but still they changed a bit. So 49% of the people asked, or of those Orthodox believers who were asked, said that they belong to Ukrainian Orthodox Church, this one who got this autonomy, this church independence, and 16% said that they belong to Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchate, and 14% said that they just didn't decide. But this is only to show how it's diverse, so that you who don't know the situation in Ukraine, so you can understand that we have still two Orthodox churches, big Orthodox churches, and it looks like this. This belonging. And as I come from memory politics, field, I was really interested in how religion and memory are interconnected, and I followed the theoretical framework of Daniel Leger, who wrote about, or who studied the religion as the chain of memory. So for her, religion and memory are really interconnected and entangled. And she underlined the legitimizing role of religion in the building of tradition that holds together diverse members of the community. So I asked myself, what happens when there is one majority religion? So we have one religion, Orthodox Christianity, and it is represented by different churches. And how then is this tradition holding the community together Does it create and sustain the community, or what is happening there? And I argued that in circumstances favoring the coexistence of several different churches representing the same religion, chances are high that this legitimizing potential of religion will not only be used for consolidating the group, but also for splitting the group or fostering several group identities within one country. And in such a context, each church tries to create its own specific tradition. And of course, this tradition is orthodoxy, so the religion is the same, but then the churches use the different resources to still present themselves as different entities, and they use very much the past to create these different narratives about themselves, to present themselves differently. And I looked at this creation of tradition through the theory of patrimonialization, and I use it as a conceptual framework. And as a villager, I also see this heritage value of religious legacy, in which religion is regarded as a common cultural good transferred from the past. And in this way, religion is working as an evolutionary framework of memory. And how I understand this patrimonialization, this is a very difficult word for me, but it's like really how religion is constituted as a collective patrimony, theologically naturalized and capable of being claimed by one and all. It has become a set of markers rooted in a distant past. So we can see that both churches in Ukraine, and I was analyzing both Kyiv Patriarchate and Moscow Patriarchate, they present themselves as like the most traditional churches for Ukrainian people. So, when I was looking at one specific case, and it was the commemoration of anniversaries of Christianization of Kyivan Rus by both churches. So it was really obvious that they both present themselves as most national, most traditional churches for Ukraine. As a villager, she wrote that patrimonial religion nurtures the dream of a continuing shared identity, able to survive the accelerating pace of change. So for her, and she writes about France. So for her, it's really like how Catholicism serves as this common tradition, even for those people who are secular, but still who are sharing this tradition, like they are all celebrating Christmas in the same way. So for her, it was like this working of memory. But what I see in Ukraine, each Orthodox Church constructs historical narratives that nurture this dream of a continuing shared identity, but they share like this different identities, which are constructed through this patrimonialization process. And here I will just maybe shortly present some empirical examples so that you understand what I mean and how these churches were positioned themselves. So we come from, we start from 1988, when the millennium of Christianization of Kyivan Rus was celebrated. And of course, back then it was only Russian Orthodox Church there. There was no Kyiv Patriarchate or Moscow Patriarchate in this way in Ukraine. So it was one church, Russian Orthodox Church. And how they were presenting themselves in these celebrations, it's really like Russian Orthodox Church being Russian Patriotic Church. And this is interesting because when if you remember, maybe some not, because you are too young to remember, but still, it was like the end of the Soviet era, right? They already knew that something is going on. Even in Ukraine, then there were already some protests against the Soviet rule, and there were really this grassroots movements across the country, especially in the Baltics. The Soviet state was in the crisis, really. But then comes this millennium, and then both the Soviet state and the Russian Orthodox Church, they come close to each other, and they make this common celebration. So the state was really very much engaged with the celebration. So if one thinks about like the Soviet state being atheist pretty much, but still like towards the end of the Soviet period, we see that the state really tries to use everything they can use, and the church and the religion becomes a very good resource. So as Victoria Smolkin writes about this celebration, it is a national celebration sanctioned by the Soviet state. So it was really sanctioned by the state and supported by the state. And Ukrainian historian of religion, Natalia Shlikta, wrote about the celebration that it was the last honeymoon in relations between the declining Soviet regime and the Russian Orthodox Church. So when I think about this honeymoon, one can say that this kind of honeymoon, it didn't really stop there, because when you see then how Russian state, after already the Soviet Union dissolution, how the Orthodoxy itself became a part of this state doctrine, state ideology, and especially after 2007, when both Putin and Patriarch Kirill, Vladimir Gundyaev, start actively using the Russian world concept. And in this concept, Orthodoxy is one of the cornerstones. So that is why kind of what started as the honeymoon, it can be seen as the continuation of this honeymoon, which is still continuing. And then I won't stop by reading all these citations, but what is important here to underline that both the state, in person of Mikhail Gorbachev, and the church itself, in person of the Patriarch Kyivan, they presented the Orthodoxy, and they presented this Christianization of Kyivan Rus really through the prism of like Russian nation. So if you look into this citation at the end, Gorbachev directly says that this is our fatherland's history, its culture, and the Russian state. So they use this Российская державность. So one can really ask oneself, okay, this is the Soviet Union in the crisis. So, but they still continue this kind of rhetoric, which is very kind of exclusive, because it excludes other countries, even those who are Orthodox. So, and very close to that is also the declarations by Kyivan. So here we can see that both the state and the Russian Orthodox Church, they use very often the same rhetorics. And so they speak a lot about this motherland, like socialist motherland, and interestingly enough, Kyivan even speaks about the protection from foreign encroachments. So this is something. So it's kind of presenting that the Orthodoxy has to be preserved and defended. But when we come to the celebrations in Kiev, and Kiev and Moscow became the places where this celebration was really great. There was a lot of people coming both to Moscow from all over the world, really, and to Kyiv, of course, because this was the place where Volodymyr is commemorated the most. So, and here you can see how how it looked like in Kyiv. But what is interesting that here it was already Filaret, and Filaret he was the head of the church in Ukraine. And then, if you know, then the history of Ukrainian church, then he became the one of the founding fathers, so to say, of this Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Kyiv Patriarchate. So, but still then in 1988, he was a part of Russian Orthodox Church, and he was actually the head of all these celebrations. And here he really, when speaking in Kyiv, he really underlined that Orthodox Church has never separated itself from people. And he spoke again and again about this unity between the church and the people. He doesn't say like Ukrainian people, which kind of people, but what is interesting here that in his rhetorics there is no this focus on Russian people, because in Pimen's and in Gorbachev's speeches, it's mainly a Russian statement they are speaking about. And then I come to 90s, so it's like I was looking into like every decade, so 88, then 98, then 2008, and 2018. But what is interesting here that in 90s we already have the Moscow Patriarchate, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchate. We have Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Kyiv Patriarchate, and they really try to present, as I already said, themselves in Ukraine for Ukrainian people as these patrimonial churches. And what is going on that then we have already the new patriarch of Russian Orthodox Church, it's Alexei, and it's in his speeches, when you look at the speeches of his just Alexei, then you see that he tries to underline that in Ukraine the church and the people are very split. And kind of the Russian Orthodox Church, and through Russian Orthodox Church, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchate kind of is this uniting force, can be this uniting force. And when we come to the Kyiv, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchate itself, so it's again the continuation of the same narrative, which we can see in Alexei's speeches, and it's also a lot about the split of Ukrainian church and Ukrainian people. This is something what is really continuing throughout the 90s, and especially it's seen during this celebrations of Christian, the Kyivan Rus. And then they also underline that for them, as you see, this Kyiv Patriarchate is only like political organization. And I think that this discourse on and this emphasis on Kyiv Patriarchate being political and politicized and only a national project is something which is repeated throughout all the years, and even now when we will come to this. Now this is exactly what is repeated not only by the churches but also by the researchers. But I mean that even if Kyiv Patriarchate is and was political, but it doesn't mean that Moscow Patriarchate was not political. They both were, and they both continue to be. But on the other hand, what Kyiv Patriarchate is saying, and which discourses they repeat, they also used the same rhetorics and accusing the Moscow Patriarchate that they are just a political project of Moscow, and as you see here, that they are completely dependent on Moscow, and who impede this unification of the churches in Ukraine. And then in 2008, so we are jumping again 10 years forward, we have Ukraine, which is already after post-Orange Revolution Ukraine, and during the Orange Revolution, it was Viktor Yushchenko, who was very pro-European. He became the president in results of this revolution, and he was very strong supporter of Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Kiev Patriarchate and the supporter of its autonomy. So he really promised to get the independence during his presidency, but he didn't succeed. But during his presidency and during these celebrations of the Kyivan Kyivan Rus, Patriarch of Constantinople, Bartholomew I, he came to Kiev to celebrate, and Yushchenko used this opportunity to show that he is working for this independence to be granted to the Ukrainian Church. And what then the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate did, it was again as it was in 1998, so it was continuing this this discourse of Ukraine being split, and I think that here this citation from Alexei shows very well how they were presenting both Yushchenko and the whole Kiev Patriarchate. So like we read here, having lost political support, he, meaning Yushchenko, thought that he is equal to Prince Vladimir, who can unite something which is absolutely not possible to unite. So we can see that this is again this emphasis on this split society and split in the church, which is not possible even to unite. But on the other hand, there is a lot of emphasis on the unity of all Slavic people, if you read Alexei's speeches. So this is a lot about unity of Russians, Ukrainians, and Belarusians. What is happening after 2014? So we are jumping again one decade later. That religion and this the question of canonicity of the church and autonomy of the church becomes the question of security, of national security, and Poroshenko really kind of securitizing this question. So when you read this citation, you can see that he can, and this was the first time when the leader of the country really accuses the church, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchate, in being not loyal to the state, because all the time we have from 90s to 2016 mainly, by this speech of Poroshenko, we can see this kind of tolerance to all the churches. And even when Yushchenko was became the president, he had this ceremony of becoming the president. All the heads of the churches were present, so it was always like very present, this kind of demonstration of the tolerance of all the religions and all the confessions. But here in 2016, after the annexation of Crimea and the war in Donbass, Poroshenko uses this very strong language against one of the churches. And actually in 2019, Ukrainian Orthodox Church does get their autonomy, does get this canonical status from Constantinople, and it's presented as they are returning to their mother's church. So if we look at this short summary about just what was happening from 90 to 2019, we had this multiplicity of churches, but still all these churches were very political. They were using past to create their own narratives about themselves, and but they created different narratives. So that Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Kyiv Patriarchate, they really presented themselves as a national church. Then Moscow Patriarchate presented themselves as a part of a bigger Christianity, this in unity with the other Slavic Orthodox people, but actually it was really functioning as kind of competitive narratives in the situation where you have a lot of like the market of choices, where you have choices, and this is up to the believers to decide where to go, to which church to belong. And then from 2014, we see this process of secularization of both religion and the church, and also of the past. And I just wanted to, do I have more time? Can I use some time more? Because I want really to show how different churches, or mainly it's Greek Catholic Church and Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Kyiv Patriarchate, and now this independent Ukrainian Orthodox Church, how they are engaged in memory politics, and in especially in memory of Heavenly Hundred. These are people who were killed during the Euromaidan protests, and then the war. Just a couple of words. And if one looks at the commemoration of the victims of Euromaidan, this commemoration began already when the first victims were killed on the streets. So these commemorations were really spontaneous, and very often they had religious elements. But what was also important for this connection between memory and religion, to see that the churches were present also, like the priests were present at the protest from the very beginning. So the Greek Catholic Church was there from the first days of the protests, and actually Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Kyiv Patriarchate, when they gave the place for the wounded in their main cathedral, St. Michael Cathedral in Kyiv, it became kind of very big symbol of Maidan protests themselves. And there were even state orders that regulate memory of the Heavenly Hundred, and the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Kyiv Patriarchate itself, they granted the medal for sacrifice and love for Ukraine to all 106 heroes of Heavenly Hundred. So it's a lot of, again, we see this state politics and church politics, which goes together, how they are handling the remembrance of Euromaidan protests. And I just wanted to show materiality of this memory. So you can see the chapels in Kyiv, which were built just in memory of the victims of Euromaidan, and they are kind of inscribed in the national memory, which was already there. And this is the memory of Holodomor. This is the memory of Christianity itself. And it's also later it became a part of the memory of the soldiers killed in the war in Donbass. It became also a part of this memory. So if one looks at this so this is, if one looks at the picture, this this is very small part of the city, but this is very central part. And you see how this memory is kind of agglomerated, accumulated at one place. What's going on? And when I was trying to see which other parts of history are kind of taken into consideration by the heads of the churches, and I was looking at them, what was saying, like Filaret, the head of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Kyiv Patriarchate, and Svetoslav, the head of Ukrainian Catholic Church, and they pretty much use the same rhetoric and the same parts from the past. So they use this imaginary of Christian martyrs of the first century. They use Cossacks when they are the past connected to the Cossack history, and they also speak a lot about communist past and Russian aggression as forces of evil. And when you look at what kind of future they imagine, and of course it's like renewed Ukraine. And in this renewed Ukraine, in their rhetorics, it's a lot of emphasis on this sacrifice and patriotism, love to the motherland, and these are the prominent topics in their speeches when they speak about the memory of the victims of Maidan. And just show you the pictures. It's Andriy who took all these pictures, so you can see how this memory of the Euromaidan has really very prominent religious features. So I won't stop a lot here, but here you see even the icon in Asquith Great Chapel in Kyiv, and in this icon you can see the faces of those heavenly, a lot of those who belong to this heavenly hundred. So these are really like photographic pictures of them. And here you see the photographs. And this is an interesting icons because you can see how different heroes from different periods of Ukrainian past, they are all put together, so that it's like continuity of this martyrdom and heroism is put together on these icons. And this is also from Andriy. Again, so you can see that this imaginary is pretty much similar in all these icons. And now we come to nowadays, and this is something what I just recently discovered and saw, these icons which come already from the war, from the invasion in 2022. So these are very recent examples how the religious iconography and the imaginary inscribed into the memory of the war, which is going on already now. Yeah, and it's even present in this very like folk or popular representations of the war. And just a couple of words about the destruction of religious heritage and lives, because what is also prominent here is that as you can see, as for November 2022, there were 350 objects of religious heritage destroyed by the war in Ukraine, and among them it was 179 which belonged to Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchy. So you can see that it's most of these churches are destroyed, because this is the part of Ukraine where they have most of the churches and most of the church boards who belong to Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchy live there. So you can see that somehow it's paradoxical in a way that the Russian Orthodox Church or Russian state is destroying the buildings and lives of the Orthodox Church and Orthodox people. And just a couple of words about the religious communities, because this is also something very important to underline, as here Maxim Basin, the executive director of the Institute for Religious Freedom, says that religious leaders are of special value to Russian occupation authorities, since churches and religious communities traditionally have a high level of trust among Ukrainian citizens. The occupation authorities are trying to use religious leaders to legitimize the occupation administration and to minimize the resistance of the local population. And very often those religious leaders who don't want to cooperate with the occupational forces, they become targets of torture and imprisonment, and very often also killed. So now we are really stepping into the new unknown, as I wrote, because just a couple of days ago, Volodymyr Zelensky had this speech, and also granted this order to investigate the role of and the place of Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchate in Ukraine. So there will be new investigations, because Ukrainian security forces found a lot of evidence that the priests in the highest position and in the most prominent churches which belong to the Church of Moscow Patriarchate, that they had a lot of pro-Russian material, and so these investigations, I guess they are just starting now, so we don't know how it will be. And we will see how it will all end, and what kind of religious and church situation there will be in Ukraine, hopefully when Ukraine wins this war. Yeah.